Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar where we'll help you prepare for future 90-day TLS validity. In previous webinars, we introduced Google's validity proposal to you and held a panel discussion for all your questions. And today we want to follow it up with a 90-day checklist. If you're interested further in the topic, you can always go back to the previous webinars. You can find them on our website. For today, we have Henry Lamb, Sales Engineering Manager, and Tim Callan, Chief Experience Officer here at Sectigo with us. They'll be talking us through the 4 steps that will get you 90-day ready. As always, we're recording this presentation and we'll share it with you after the webinar. If you have any questions during the presentation, we'd love to hear them. Please pop them into the chat function and we'll try to answer as many as we can at the end. And with this, Henry and Tim, over to you.
Thank you, Lisa. Sorry, Leah. How are you doing today, Henry?
Very good. And yourself, Tim?
I'm doing well. So why don't I just set a little bit of context for those of you who have joined the other webinars that Leah mentioned earlier. You will already be familiar with this, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. What happened was on March 3rd, 2023, Google on its Moving Forward Together webpage, which is something the Google Chromium project manages in order to show the world, sort of telegraph the world what it intends to do in terms of certificate and public trust, put up a statement that said essentially that they intend to limit the duration of the maximum allowable duration of a TLS, public TLS certificate to 90 days. And I have, slightly exerted here, but the quoted excerpt goes as follows. In a future policy update or CA browser form ballot proposal, we intend to introduce a reduction of TLS server authentication subscriber certificate maximum validity from 398 days to 90 days. If you want to read this for yourself, just do a search on Chromium Moving Forward Together. It'll be the first thing that you find. But there are a couple things here that are probably worth calling attention to. So the first of them is that you see obviously reducing maximum validity from 398 days to 90 days. And this is an important point because that is 90 days term. That's not 90 days certs with some extra slot time. It's not really, 4-month certs or anything like that. It's truly a 90-day limit. And that's quite different from 398 days. It's also worth noticing at the top when they say that they'll do this in a future policy update or CA form ballot proposal. The inclusion of policy updates is important because what this means is if the CA browser forum can't line up behind it, then Chromium is prepared to just declare that this is a requirement anyway. And we've seen this happen in the past. We saw Apple do this when they took us down to 1-year certs, where 2 ballots had failed in the CA browser forum, and Apple just stood up and said, well, we're going to make it a root program requirement. That's that, right? And then the other root programs quickly followed suit. And by the time it actually rolled around, Chrome and Firefox were also making it a requirement in addition to Apple. So, we can imagine something very similar happening here in terms of those other browsers, and Chrome has made its intention very clear. So with that, we've had a series of, put together a series of materials between March 3rd and today to try to help our customers and our public wrap their heads around the implications of this change, when it's coming, how it's going to come, and what they have to do it. And the latest of those is Henry's model of the 90-day certificate checklist. So with that, Henry, I think you're going to do most of the talking today. Oops, I went in the wrong direction. I need to be going forward. And it's worth also understanding that DCV will become 90-day. The maximum domain control validation duration, reuse duration, will also be 90 days. So every time you're getting one of these certificates, you're also going to have to redo your DCV. The estimated timeline, this is my estimate, without belaboring it too much. I am expecting that sometime in the summer, we will learn of a specific timeline. And my best guess is that that timeline will have an October 2024, let's say a Q4 2024 implementation date for where certificate term will drop to 90 days. And these are just estimates. There's nothing official from Google. If we get something official from Google or another source, we will update these estimates. Until that occurs or until there's new information, this is the best estimate we have. So with that, as I just said, Henry, you created a 90-day certificate checklist. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yep, it's very 4 simple steps in the 90-day checklist, because to what Tim had mentioned, they're coming. And in the past, everyone is used to doing 1-year certs once a year, but when at 90 days, it becomes a bit of a burdensome to do. So in order to prepare yourself, this checklist was created in such a way where it helps you get an idea of what you have available today, what you could also then map to which technology is using it, along with also alleviating the amount of heavy lift you need to do for 90-day certs. You could automate all of this. And then from there on, you add it into a deployment plan to actually set your priority on how you want to implement this in your environment. The idea of the checklist is to actually help you reduce the impending event that we all know it's coming.
Mm-hmm. So do you want to jump in? Tell us about certificate discovery.
So as I mentioned before, we all know that we issue a lot of certs for all of our websites, whether it is in the public world or in the private world. So what most customers are generally don't have or won't have a utility for, or may not know that you need to do this, is to do a certificate discovery. And what I mean by that is you want to know where your certs are, whether again in public trust or private trust, and where it's being used, so you have an idea what you have. In a lot of instances in the past, even for today's world, it's the 1-year cert. Most customers don't know what they have. But the idea is to canvas it all, whether you're using something from SCM and a utility that we have, so we can find all those certs that you can then get it consolidated in one spot. If you don't have our platform, you could use other tools such as Qualys, Sensors, or Tenable, or any other utilities that could find the certificate in the location you say, go look for it there, to get an idea of what you have today.
So are CT logs helpful in this regard, Henry? Like, could I go to crt.sh and search on my various domains and use that to discover certs that may have been issued on my domains, whether or not I know about them?
Absolutely. Certificate transparency log is another source of, or another location you can gather all of the certificates that have been issued in the domains that you control.
And what's nice about CT logs, like in general, one of the troubles with certificate discovery, if you're running a mix of private and public certificates, which most people are in the real world, is that the CT log will only discover the public certs, right? And your private certs could have expirations. If you don't know about them, you could have outages, and all of this could be bad, right? But in this case, since we're really talking about inventorying the certificates that are going to be affected by the Google proclamation, and because that proclamation by definition only applies to public SSL, and because all public SSL, aka TLS certs, need to be in CT logs, that if you did go to something like crt.sh, and as long as you searched on the right domains that you're really in control of, in principle, you should find 100% of your active certs.
Correct. Absolutely correct in that statement.
All right, cool. So that's great. Or again, SCM, if you're an SCM user, that can make it much easier, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I discovered my certs. I've got them. And I guess before we move on to the vendor technology list, what am I doing with this list?
It's just to canvas your environment because, as I mentioned before, most customers don't know what they potentially have issued. Some customers do, some customers don't. Some customers swear by it, it's all Sectigo, and somehow find out they have a GoDaddy cert.
Sure.
So that's a big issue.
Rogue certs happen all the time.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
All right. And then you're saying, right, then that cert suddenly goes down to the 90-day duration. There is some kind of, it's a cert that you're not aware of. They start getting cycled out at a 90-day term. Nobody's there with anything automated in place. It doesn't keep up. And then, sometime not more than 90 days after the last date for 1-year certs, you have some kind of failure, you have some kind of expiration event that you weren't expecting, and now you have a problem. But if I can find all those certs, whether or not I thought I had them under my control, I'll be prepared and I'll be ready to handle that. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Gotcha. All right. So next, your vendor technology list.
Now, this is the hard part.
Okay.
As we all know, every organization, including Sectigo itself, we all use different vendors along the way. Some are better than others in keeping of what they purchase and what's internally or externally they're using. So an idea that this specific step is to get again, same concept, you get a canvas of what you're currently using that needs an SSL certificate, and you build that list. Main reason is that if 90-day comes, if you have 1,000 IIS servers, you don't want to take one cert and populate 1,000 times and potentially miss one along the way. The idea is to get as much of an exhaustive list as possible so you can identify what is currently utilizing a certificate that is from a public CA, that if and when we go down in 90-day certs, you know where that certificate is sitting on a given system, so that when you do need to change it, you are able to change it and not have an issue in the future.
So do you have any advice or thoughts or tips and tricks about how people should go about locating these platforms, applications, products that depend on certificates?
Our certificate, if you use our certificate discovery, that could be a good start point. Sorry, our certificate discovery capability in SCM specifically, or a tool that can connect to a DNS name and port, or IP and port. Because what happens is that will then lead you to the next location of what is servicing that. In some cases, it could be a firewall. In other cases, it could be the actual web server. That will give you a list of what is being presented when you hit that given location, to then be able to gather that. The other alternatives is there are other applications out there that could help you find that. There's a lot of IT inventory systems out there that could do the crawling of your network to find all of this data as well, if you need to, if you have something available.
And once again, you would hope in general that people know what their products are, right? They know what they're paying for, if nothing else. But shadow IT happens, right?
Yep.
And so it may be that there's a platform that the business really depends on that got put in place and is being used by somebody that you don't have direct visibility on and control over. And so I don't know, do you want to, maybe you could partner with a finance team and try to say, look, I need to get to the bottom of every single security or every single, IT vendor that we're giving money to, because how else am I going to make this inventory? Like perhaps someone else can help, because somewhere along the line, if these things are in production, someone's spending money on them.
Absolutely. Yep. That's another source and another location you go to ask for assistance as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I get my big list of vendors now, but even if I have my list of technology vendors, I have to also marry that to certificate usage, right?
Yep.
Because
Absolutely.
I might have things that don't depend on certs. So what's the basic process for doing that?
You merge the two lists together.
Okay.
The discovered certificate list to this. It's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else on that?
Nope. That's usually the heavy lift.
Automation mapping.
This will be the fun part. Acme is a theme here. Acme is a standard protocol that was developed specifically on how to automate certificate, specifically SSL certificate. Once you have that list, there is a myriad of different types of Acme clients out there that could automate a certificate to the given platform itself. This is just a purely mapping exercise so that you understand that today you could be using 0, but the idea of this is once you get step 1 done, you get step 2 done. Step 3 is just saying these are all the Acme clients that are potentially that can be utilized for these given sets of application, to at least start give you an idea at a macro level of what you can automate using some of the readily available Acme clients out there.
Gotcha. So I'm going across and I'm saying I might do this one with CertBot. and I might do that one with the Sectigo connector, and I'm aware of the fact that I have options. Now, some of these, what if there isn't an option?
Acme still is usable. Let's give an example. If you go with today's way of getting a certificate and you're not automating it, you're going to some website providing a form of either a certificate signing request or you're requesting a cert and then you're moving it to a given system manually.
Mm-hmm.
In the case of 90 days, Acme is still usable because what happens is Acme is a protocol that could get the certificate for you and then put it onto a central system for you to then move it yourself rather than you having to say, oh, I forgot the certs expire. I need to go generate it myself manually. I don't remember the command. Oh, I need to log into the website to submit it. Oh, I didn't do validation. Acme could still help alleviate some of the additional steps that you may or may not remember, and you can have it automated every 90 days or a little bit shorter than that to get you the cert.
So certificate provisioning can occur through Acme, and then I just have to do the last mile installation myself in that scenario, which still is awful, and you'd rather not, right?
Yes.
But I guess it's better.
Yes. It's a little bit more streamlined, less steps, but yes, ultimately it's still not the most optimum, but it still gets you something a little bit closer and less of a panic mode when it hits the 90-day mark.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay. And then last one, deployment planning.
As much as we all say that once we get all of the first 3 steps done, you still need to prioritize. You can't do all at once, because if you do, it's sort of like jamming 50 items through a small little door and you'll never get it through. So in order to actually progress with making your environment more automated, you do want to get everything you've done in step 3 and prioritize what do you believe is your highest asset, or what do you believe is the lowest hanging fruit that you could get moving to show progression in getting your environment automated.
So Henry, question for you. I'm predicting that once a decree comes, whether it's through a CAD forum ballot or through a root program decree, that enterprises are going to get, let's say, not less than a year to implement this. So a year or a little more rounding to the nearest quarter, right? So enterprises will get, let's say, 12 to 15 months is my belief before this goes into effect. So is that enough time to do this work?
Yes, to start, because think of it this way. Even though the decree occurs on, let's just say we go by your estimate timeline, October 1st,
right?
That would be the last day of when the certificate, that is the last day of when you can issue one year cert. So if you started, say, let's just say we got the decree in August 1st, and the decree is to October 2024 is when your cert ends. If you start then, you could start the process, and then as you trickle past October 1st, 2024, you still have certificates that will not expire for another year, which you have an additional year on top of it. So to answer your question, yes, you can easily get through this.
Yeah, but that certificate, let's say it is October 15, 2024. That certificate that's due to expire in December of 2024.
Correct.
Is potentially a problem unless you are actually locating these things and front loading renewals in order to buy yourself some extra time.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I was trying to lead to, Tim.
Okay. Right. So this is an important point. So knowing when your certs are expiring and when you're going to be ready for automated 90-day is part of this, right? Because you could say these systems will be ready for automated 90-day on day 0, but these systems are not going to be. So for the systems that are not going to be, then you turn around and you say, well, what's my, when are my certs expiring? And do I have to go proactively early renew some of these certs to ensure that nothing expires? If it's going to take me 6 months to have system B ready to go, I have to make sure that there are no certs that are going to expire on system B prior to 6 months later than day 0. And I should go look at my certs. I could see when the last days are and then say, okay, this set of certificates right here needs to be early renewed so that I don't have a problem.
Correct. Absolutely
Okay.
correct.
All right. So that's part of the planning that you've discussed here.
Absolutely. It's all your priorities on what is deemed to be potential headaches in the very, very, very near future.
And either way, no matter how you slice it, if day 0 is the day that's the last day to issue a 1-year cert, if by day 399 you have not had automation put in place on a particular system, then you're just doing it the hard way. There's no getting around it, because that is the last day that you might conceivably have had a 1-year certificate. Yep. So that's an important thing to bear in mind. And, you know, so how do you feel about things like legacy systems that have been in place for a long time, that are difficult to root out, that are difficult to upgrade, and that we can't really live without, but don't ever and will never support Acme? What's your advice for somebody in that situation?
Well, it would be more an open conversation. The first question is this a publicly facing system or is it an internally facing system? Because
Sure.
if it's a historical reason of providing a public cert as it was the easiest form to get on it, then, and if the 90-day becomes a burden, then it may be a different conversation of, do you have an internal system that can issue an internal certificate that can be trusted?
Sure.
That could help you out.
Yeah.
If the answer is no, it is publicly facing, then Acme, even though Acme may not be able to automate it directly onto the system, Acme could still help you get the certificate to put it into a predictable spot for you to then move it to the system. So therefore, you're not scrambling every 90 days to go to a website to submit a request.
And I have to wonder if for some of these, that's when you do finally bite the bullet and upgrade that, right? That you say, okay, sorry, enough is enough. This is an unsupported operating system. It's going to keep getting further and further behind. And this is the thing that just put us over the line. And we're going to justify the trouble and the expense. And we're going to make this on a current modern infrastructure.
Yep, that's another possibility. And I believe that may occur a lot quicker than most people believe, simply because the panic will set in once the decree happens.
But that's worth thinking about that ahead of time too, right? Like if you've got components of your infrastructure that aren't upgradable, like I love your idea of seeing if you can handle it with private CA. But let's just say hypothetically that's not a path forward. Then at that point, it's a great idea now, like this year, to start having conversations and saying these parts of our infrastructure are not 90-day future proofed. And what's our plan to address that? Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. What else on deployment planning, Henry?
I think once this is all completed, even though it's not part of the, it's an optional step 4, start back from the beginning. Because even though you believe, when I say start back from the beginning, do a certificate discovery again. Because even though you may have believed that you put the plan in place, someone will eventually do some shadow IT again and cause you additional problems. So you want to keep that cycle going.
You're
you
right.
may not run it every day. You may run it once every month.
Rogue certs, I think that's such a great point. Rogue certs happen when they happen. They're rogue. They don't happen on your timeline. They don't stop happening because you've got a project. Shadow IT happens when it happens. It's shadow. And that occurs when it occurs, and it doesn't stop happening because you've got a program. So this isn't really a one and done. Like maybe there's a heavy lift up front, but this is now ongoing maintenance of this discovery, knowledge, and planning really into perpetuity or until 90-day certificates are just the way of the world.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. That's a very good point. And that's something for people to think about too. If you're thinking about this as a project, sure, you've got a project because probably a lot of the heavy lift is up front. But even when that heavy lift is done, there is ongoing maintenance that should not be neglected. And if you do neglect it, it could hurt you. Okay, Very good. Anything else on this or the whole topic?
Not from my side. But like I said, this is an impending event that we all are potentially going to experience, even for our own organization here at Sectigo.
Yeah, absolutely. We got to do it too, don't we? Yeah.
We're actually in progress.
Good. That's great to hear. I think we should be. We better be. So again, just to recap, certificate discovery is your step 1. Your complete vendor technology list is your step 2. Automation mapping is your step 3. And deployment planning is your step 4. And then go back to 1 again and continue maintenance of it until you've actually made the transition to 90-day certificates. All right, so as always, if you've seen this webinar before, if you did like this conversation, one of Henry's and my coworkers, Jason Sirocco, and I maintain a podcast called Root Causes, a PKI and security podcast. It's about all matters digital certificates, PKI, encryption, PQC, 90-day certificates, et cetera, et cetera. We're keeping you up to date on news items like 90-day certificates and other things. And we are generally, saying a lot about what's going on in the world of PKI. Most weeks we have 2 different episodes. We have more than 300 episodes published, and we would love to have you join us. So if you listen to podcasts, just search for Root Causes and you will find us very easily. And with that, I think we're ready for questions.
Brilliant. Thank you both for the presentation. One question was on one of your last topics. They wanted to clarify on the validity once the requirements come into place. So theoretically, if the deadline was October 1st and I issue a 1-year certificate on 30th of September, will it become invalid after 1 year or after 90 days?
After 1 year. So let's be clear. Sorry if I didn't clarify that up front. That's a very important point. We're talking about a moratorium on issuance of new certificates with more than 90 days term. Existing certificates that are compliant will be allowed to live out their full lifespan. So let's say hypothetically October 1, 2024 is the date. Hypothetically, what the audience member asked is exactly right. If you got a cert issued on September 30th, that would be good for the full term of that cert. So nobody's going to go back and cut that off as of January 1. They're just going to not allow a new cert to be issued, if that makes sense. So there is a concept of what we talked about, that there are places where I'm worried about being ready for this. If I can find my certs and front load my renewals early, I can buy myself some extra time. And that's a legitimate thing. It's not cheating, it's fine. And that's something that you can do for sure.
Great, thanks for clarifying. Another question was around 90-day certificates and that period. Do you think it will stay at 90 days, or do you think validity requirements could go down further?
Oh, I don't think 90 days is the end. I do think it's the end for a few years. So once it goes to 90 days, I don't think it would drop anytime in the next year or 2. The cadence seems to be about every couple years. And that's to give the industry and everybody time to adjust. That cadence could shorten, but I'm not predicting that it will. So I think we're all going to have to learn how to deal with 90-day certificates. We all will deal with it. Once that it's in place, that will mostly be driven by automation, and that'll be good for everybody when it's automated. Once it is automated, it becomes reasonable to say we're going to reduce the duration of certificates further because it's automated. And that'll be relatively easy for people to weather once they are automated. But they're going to give everybody some time to get these things implemented and in place. I would say certainly more than a year before something like that occurs again.
Great, thank you, Tim. How will 90-day certificates affect IT departments? What will change for them?
Henry, what do you think of that?
A lot of heavy lift if it's not automated. It's the simple truth.
Right.
Because keep in mind, today you're doing a certificate request, or you're getting a certificate for 398 days, and you could use it for a year and not worry about it for probably 370 days. But when it gets to 90 days, you're most likely doing at least 5 a year because you need to rotate it and overlap them. So if you don't have automation, your IT will, your workload will 5x at a minimum.
Yeah, I could imagine. I think a lot of people are going to be at 6 times a year cadence because that lets you do it every 2 months and it's just easy to understand. It gives you 30 days of overlap in case you have a problem, which is enough time that you can deal with it, get a new cert, roll things back, fix the problem with the system, whatever it is. And that's kind of normal. And that's actually, that's something, Let's Encrypt is capped right now at 90 days. And their recommendation is to rotate your certs every 60 days. So I think we'll probably see something in that ballpark in terms of the number of times it's done per year.
Okay, great. Someone's asking, I'm on board with this, but budgets are hard to come by. Can you name the top reasons for making this a priority with the C-suite?
Lack of outages. So if paying for automation is expensive, not having critical services work is many orders of magnitude more expensive, right? The cost of SLA failures, of lost business, of bad customer satisfaction, of security breaches, of the fundamental inability for your employees to do their jobs is much bigger than the cost of an IT project to put automation in place. You can't even compare them. That's the reason.
Cool. Similar along those lines probably is what will happen if our systems aren't able to automate SSL when 90-day validities come into effect?
You got to do it the hard way.
Yep.
That's what. Right? There isn't really another way. I mean, your ways are stop using these services or do it manually or do it through automation. You can buy yourself some time if you front load some renewals, but that's just buying yourself time. It's not ultimately addressing the need. It's just delaying the deadline for addressing the need. But there isn't really another choice.
Yeah. Great. We had 2 questions that were similar around discovery. One, can we just speak some more on discovery? How does it work? And someone asked they would love to see a demo of it. On this one, I can say, get in touch with us. We can organize a demo for you. Our sales team is very happy to show you how that works.
Henry, you want to explain discovery?
Yep. So if it's a Sectigo discovery, what happens is all we're doing is you're giving us a list of locations you want us to, that you believe or that you want us to scan. And what we're doing is we're just opening up a connection and say, hey, you told us to scan this place. What cert do you have there? And we pull it back into our environment so that it helps you get an idea of what is actually being presented. It's similar to how you access a website and you go there and you load the website. In that specific instance, it's just fetching the certificate and searching back and put it into our system. So it allows us to help you gather the data in a central location to then actually review it accordingly.
Okay, great. One I think you already spoke on a little bit at the beginning, but it was another question. Will validation be required every 90 days too?
So let's break validation into 2 parts. There's domain control validation and there's org validation. I am guessing from the question that they mean organization validation. And the answer to that is there is no indication. So there is a clear statement in the Moving Forward Together page that is completely unambiguous that says that DCV will be required every 90 days in tandem with this other move. So the intention of the Chromium project in that regard is crystal clear. There has been no mention that I can find anywhere from any root program or NCA browser forum or from any credible source about the idea of reducing the time for organization validation reuse. And so that's very important, right? Because what that means is you could get your org validated, and then you can go ahead and you can issue your certs whatever it is every 60 days without having to go through that every time, right? And that makes it much easier. You're only dealing with one callback a year. You're only getting other things like that done once a year. And you can run your certs on whatever cadence you want, which could be 60 days, or once you're automated, it could be every 7 days if you want. Doesn't matter. You don't have to be revalidated every time. And that's a very important point because it makes the use of automation much more practical for most enterprises, all enterprises.
Okay. A follow-up question just came in and asked, so does that mean DCV will be required every 90 days as well?
Yeah, yes, unambiguously. That is written there. That is something that Chromium intends. Now, let me clarify. Right now, we're just really working on the stated intentions of one browser, right? They could, in principle, decide to change that requirement before anything becomes official. That said, I would be stunned if they did. This is completely in keeping with their philosophy, with other initiatives they've pushed on. All of the major group programs, including Chromium, feel that accurate and timely DCV is very important. And it's not even remotely surprising to see that as a requirement. I would be very surprised if that changed. That's their stated intent today.
Okay, great. Another question around validities and how low they can go. Will we see 1-day validity certificate or even 1-hour certificates?
Well, we do today. It's just voluntary. Like people in DevOps environments are often issuing hour-long or 30-minute long certificates. That's a kind of a common practice. Or 1-day certificates if you're a little on the conservative side. That's done all the time. Now that's all private CA, right? Private root stuff, but that sort of thing is done all the time in that kind of environment. If the question is, could we imagine a requirement where there are 1-day certs? I often, when I'm talking to my coworkers, I say, okay, let's project forward in time, 50 years from now. Do you imagine that we're going to have, 90-day certs, or are they going to be shorter? Of course they're going to be shorter, okay? So in a long enough time horizon, yes. Do I think we're seeing 1-day certs anytime in the next 10 years? Not 1 day, right? But do I think they're getting shorter and shorter? Yeah, I think they're getting shorter and shorter. I do believe that's going to happen.
Seems to be a lot of worry around this.
Yeah.
Another question, does Sectigo have Ansible or other similar tools to help with implementation?
The answer is yes. We'll be more than happy to have a call with Hap to discuss this too.
Yeah, we have a lot of integrations, and a lot of these can help you. And yeah, we can get into the details based on specifically what you need. So yeah, reach out to us directly and we'll help with that.
Okay, and then we have another fairly detailed question as well. They use certificates like LDAP, MariaDB, Radius, SAML. Should we migrate all those to an internal certificates authority?
I can take this one, Tim.
Yeah.
The answer is maybe. If it's better for your organization from a potential risk perspective, then yes. But you have to weigh why they were used for a public cert to begin with. Because to one of my previous comments, there may have been some reason in the past that it was used because it was publicly available, and if you had made that change of potential suggestion, you could have created side effects that you're not aware of. So the short answer is there's a possibility, but you'd have to investigate accordingly to determine can you get away with the internal cert versus using a public. I suspect the answer is a little bit of A, a little bit of B, but it's on a case by case or application by application perspective.
Yeah, and Henry, correct me if I'm wrong here, but one of the key questions, of course, is, am I fully confident that I have 100% control of every system that's going to need to deal with interact with the certificate containing the certificate, the system containing the certificate in question, and am I 100% confident that I can manage the root stores of all those systems correctly, right?
Yeah.
And if the answer is not yes, then you move away from public at your own risk.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Brilliant. And then I've got one more question at the moment. Again, on discovery, do they need anything else but HTTPS 443 or any other firewall requirements for it to work?
If it's in the public world, generally it's 443. There are some companies out there that do present some certificates that may not be on the traditional 443 port. So the answer is, in general, yes, it's 443, but every organization is slightly different. So the general rule, yes, is, but you have to make an assumption that there could be something additional on top of that.
Okay, great. I think we've gone through all questions. I think we can close it here then. If you've got any more questions, do get in touch with the Sectigo team. We'd love to help you. Thank you everyone for your time, and thanks Henry and Tim. We've got plenty more webinars coming up throughout the year, so keep an eye on our website. I expect there will be lots of different things around 90 days that's still to come. Yeah, we hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thank you guys.
Thank you, everyone.